Okay, this video is about male-female family dynamics and arguments. We did a little sociological experiment at my house recently where the grandma, the wife, and the daughter went on vacation for 10 days and the men stayed home. During the 10 days where there were no females in the house, there were zero arguments. There was zero yelling, which goes to show that almost all the yelling and arguments come from the women. And you say, well, why is that? Well, first of all, there were some minor disagreements about air conditioning. The fat meat eaters always want the house colder with more air conditioning than the skinny vegan myself does, okay? In just 10 days, there were accumulated about 50 dog poops in the living room floor, a wooden floor, and not a single one got picked up. The men really don't care about the dog poop for different reasons. First of all, men think of the house as kind of belonging to the woman. You know, I do at least. Like if I ever got divorced, my wife would keep the house, not me. So it's not really my property. I also resent the house because I had a great house in the past that you've seen me make previous videos about it, where I had a swimming pool, a tennis court, a full basketball court, an indoor basketball court, indoor racquetball court. I designed the house. It was magnificent. And my wife, you know, insisted on moving to a different place, which I very much didn't want to do. But I stayed with her for the sake of the kids, even though I did not want to. I was very unhappy about that. That was a dream house, and she ruined the whole thing, and I am not happy about that. But I went with her because of the kids. So the new house is her house. I really could care less about the house. The dogs are her dogs, so I could care less about the dogs. I'm nice to the dogs. I like the dogs, but I'm not responsible for their care. Anytime I get involved in taking care of the dogs, something bad always happens. Like, I just tried to take care of the dog for half a day, and the dog ran away, and I wasted hours of my valuable time chasing a dog on my few days off. So I really try to avoid anything to do with the dogs. And also, I kind of have an attitude, I pay for almost everything, okay? My wife pays for almost nothing, so I don't feel obligated to do anything. I'm already paying way more than my share. But it's also noticed that, and like when the women came home, they're like, how could you not pick up the dog phone? Aren't you disgusted that there's 50 dog poops in the living room? And the men, we really didn't care. One of the boys just sprayed like vinegar on it or something. You know, what good does that do? But the young men are real busy. They don't care about 50 dog poops in their living room. Women, especially the mama, the senior woman of the house, they're very house proud. They want the house to look nice. If they ever have a guest come over, they want their house to look impressive. It's kind of how they show off. Women pretend they don't show off, but they like to show off. And their house looking clean and nice is one of the ways they show off. I just thought it was interesting that there was no arguments, there was no yelling, there was no fuss for 10 entire days. But the house did go to shit. I mean, there was dog poop everywhere. There was none of the dishes were washed. Every single counter is filled with unwashed dishes. And also, I don't feel any obligation whatsoever to wash a dish because I just rinse out the same bowl every day. So I never make any dirty dishes. And I rinse my silverware off every day, so I don't feel anything. It's actually the young men who are spoiled, and they've always had women taking care of them, doing everything around the house. So they feel zero obligation to do it. And they just figure, soon enough the women will be home and they can take care of all this stuff. It's a female job. And I also noticed when I was growing up in America, the good old days, good America, back when America was free, the men worked typically in my house and my friends' houses, and then the woman ran the house. And that usually worked out very well. They sort of specialized. All my friends' moms, I thought they were average looking or ugly. I never once ever felt fantasy about any of my friends' moms. Never. I want this one guy who I competed against, all-state wrestler. I went and visited him in Barrington, real rich place, and his dad had like a young trophy wife, and I thought she was kind of pretty. But that was it. And believe me, young guys are always looking around for a new girlfriend, okay? And all my friends' moms were ugly or average looking. And the reason I mention that is every single one of them, there was one guy who had divorced parents, but all the rest of them, they were married, they had decent houses, it was sort of a upper middle class to upper middle class neighborhood. And there was hardly anybody who was divorced. So what I'm saying is the women had it good. They didn't have to work. Working means you're poor, okay? It means you have to go do what somebody else bosses you around and tells you to do. When you're home, you just take care of your family, where you're the queen of the whole place. And the women quite often seemed happy. I can remember lots of kids' moms, their moms would joke with us when we would come over in a very pleasant, cheerful way. That was pretty much what I would expect them to do. versus, and also my mom was always happy when we came home. She's laughing and joking, couldn't, she's like thrilled that we came home. And she always wanted the extended family together. She was always constantly inviting over extended family members and friends and entertaining at the house. Running the family was her full-time job. She did a few other things, but mostly she sort of did what she wanted to do. She's champion of the doubles tennis at the tennis club. She was on the board of directors of an orphanage. She was a tour guide at the Art Institute. She was a tour guide at the Frank Lloyd Wright architectural studio and on architecture and stuff. So she enjoyed all those things, and she was a minister of care at the church. So all that made her happy. She did what she wanted to do. She didn't do what she was forced to do because she had some job that she needed to make sure the company was happy with her and wouldn't fire her. So it worked out well. What I'm noticing now in modern America, the wife usually has to work, even if they both got graduate degrees. And because of that, they have fewer children, so the families are small. There's not that many kids. When my kids were growing up, if they wanted to play with a friend, it usually was a long drive to take them to a friend's house. Okay, versus when I was a kid, I never had to get a ride from my parents to a friend's house. I would just, walk down the street and knock on the door. There were lots of kids on my block and on the block one house away, one backyard away. And, later I got a little older and I would ride my bike to their friends' houses. Everything was pretty close. There were tons of kids all over the place. Nowadays, after a woman's worked a full day, she comes home and no one else cares about the house. It's still the case that mama is, in a lot of the families I've seen, and certainly in my family, the mama is the only one who cares about the house. And grandma cares too, because when I say grandma, I mean my mother-in-law. Okay, she cares about the house a little bit. The daughter is sort of forced to care about it because mama makes her help out, but the boys have almost like nothing to do with it, nor do they care, nor can you really get them to do anything. They passive-aggressively weasel out of everything. But what I've noticed is the biggest difference is the women are much more unhappy than they used to be. And I think the reason is the woman works all day long, and then she comes home, her house is a mess quite often. And she gets pissed off because she's worked all day, she's tired, and now she has to clean the house. And so as soon as she comes home, like my wife will come home and the house will be a mess on a routine day. And then she'll start yelling at the kids and they all run into their rooms to avoid her. And so she's stuck by herself in the kitchen with a big mess, the living room often with a mess, and she feels obligated to clean it all up. So she cleans it all up and then she kind of sprays some stinky chemical on it, which I hate. So everybody kind of avoids where she's at because she smells up the place with her cleaning stuff. And then they go in their rooms. She cleans the house. She's tired. She's kind of bitchy. And she's too tired to want to visit the extended family or to entertain them or have them come over. So these are modern family dynamics. So what I'm trying to say is there's all this bogus, public sphere nonsense about women being better off. From what I've seen, women are much worse off. They're working much longer hours. They're more tired. Everybody's more poor than they used to be. Back in the 1980s, doctors made about 4 times as much money as they do now, and the cost of living was much lower. Their yearly income was way above their house value. Okay, I mean nowadays it's the economy's much worse. Okay, a lot of people are barely getting by. So the country's poor, women are exhausted, and I think it's only going to keep getting worse. Like I said, the young men, they've seen all these divorced men talking about how they were essentially sold into slavery, having to pay sky-high alimonies, and really getting treated pretty poorly by the system. So these young men, they don't want to get married for that. Plus also, what does a guy want in a wife? He wants someone to be a partner so they can have children together. And, so he wants a woman he could rely on. These modern women with their feminism and stuff, they're unreliable. They're very promiscuous with their birth control and their abortions and stuff. So the reason why he's so stuck on proof of paternity and fidelity on the part of the woman is because he wants to know it's his kids. Because a man essentially makes himself a servant to his wife. Why be a servant to a woman unless she's going to be faithful to you, and those are going to be your kids that you're devoting your life, enslaving yourself to their benefit for? So that's a very big deal. Men understand that much better than women. For some reason, a lot of women act like they don't understand that so well. And the other thing, too, is the men don't really care that much about a lot of other things the wife would do. For example, they say, well, intellectual companionship. And not to brag, but quite often the man wants the woman because he's attractive to her. He wants to have sex with her, okay? He wants her in his bed every night. Whereas a lot of times a woman's judgment's a little more rational and logical and far thinking. She wants a man who's responsible and competent and can provide for her. Okay, so a lot of times the man's chosen on his competence and the woman is chosen on her appearance and whether or not he thinks she'll be faithful to him. So he's not looking for competence in her as much. And don't get me wrong, I love it when a woman can have an intellectual conversation with me, but they can't, not that much. I mean, I loved it when I dated this one radiology doctor who was second in her class because she could talk to me pretty well, but I was still her teacher totally, 100%. And I know another radiology lady who was second in her med school class. And so all I'm saying is just because of the dynamics of choice, it usually ends up that the man's a lot more academic than the woman. But there's exceptions to that. For example, my brother is kind of a wild and crazy guy. His nickname was Mr. Fun. So he married a woman who was very responsible and academically, financially smart, graduate degree in finance and business and all this stuff. So she could run her house and run the family finances versus, it depends. Everybody has to pick the right partner for themselves. But anyways, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding in some of those dynamics. And the main thing I've noticed is that everybody's a lot more poor and the women seem a lot less happy than they used to. So for what that's worth, just seemed interesting to me, the little experiment here of 10 days of no women in the house.